guys, it's Justin at the Survival Review, and welcome to the final part in my look at the Superman movies. Today I'm going to talk about Superman Returns, which came out in 2006 and was, let's put it this way, a little disappointing. Now, going into this movie, when it first came out, I was hyped. I was a little kid, and I loved the Christopher Reeve movies. And the fact that this was treating it like it was part of that same universe made me so happy, and it got me so pumped for this movie. This is one of the few movies I remember as a kid being insanely excited for. It was this and Star Wars Episode 3 are probably the two big movies I was excited for. And I got all the merchandise. I have all the Superman figures I have are all Superman Returns action figures back from when the movies first came out. And yeah, the movie is heavily flawed, and I know a lot of people hate it, but I don't hate it. I don't think it's great, but it has its moments. The biggest problem is that the script was just not there, and there's a lot of holes, and there's just a lot of problems, but the production value, the effects, and for the most part the cast are all really good. So I'll start out by talking about the plot a little bit. It takes place in the Donner universe. There's no specific timeline because it takes place in modern day. But Superman's been gone for 5 years. Apparently, astronomers found some wreckage of Krypton, and so he went to go see if Krypton was still there. And so he comes back 5 years later, and that whole 5-year thing is just to make it seem not like it's just a direct sequel, like Superman's already there saving the day, because that whole plot gets kind of forgotten as the movie goes on. Because we get introduced to Lex Luthor, who has a scheme. It's a real estate scheme. Sound familiar? Superman 1 and 2, anybody? And his plan is to use the crystals from the Fortress of Solitude to create an entirely new continent that will destroy America, and he'll be ruler of it. That's a terrible plan. And Superman has to stop him. But in the process, Lois Lane, she's not married, but she has a kid, and her boyfriend is Cyclops, and so there's that kind of struggle with Superman because he likes Lois. And it's basically that. The problem with the movie is that, first off, Lex Luthor's plan is idiotic. It's really? You think people are just gonna, you think nobody's gonna get mad at you for doing that? They're just gonna be oh, okay, let's live here with Lex Luthor, the guy who's responsible for all this. And not only that, if you look at it's like Krypton, it looks like kind of Fortress of Solitude-esque, the Krypton land, continent, island thing it's created. You can't even create plant life. It's just like a giant rock. So people really gonna want to live on that? And so that plot is very stupid. That's the biggest problem. That thing, it just doesn't work. It's really, Lex Luthor, you think this is really going to work? So that doesn't work. But also, the movie's runtime. The movie is 2.5 hours, and it feels like it. It goes on. There's a lot of parts in the middle where it slows down, and it just kind of drags. To put this in perspective, this movie, the runtime is it's either a minute shorter or a minute longer than, I think it's a minute longer than the extended version of Superman the movie. And Superman the movie, it doesn't even feel like it's 2.5 hours. It just goes by at a brisk pace. And the movie has some slow moments, but it's never oh, alright. It flows. The pace is there. This movie doesn't have it. It feels 3 times longer than Superman the movie. And that's just, there's not a lot of action, and normally I'm not the guy who's oh, it has to have action, but it's just a lot of slow. So Superman doesn't throw a punch the whole time. Most of the time he's always just sad, nobody understands me, and just Lois has a boyfriend, and it's really, Superman, just come on. So the acting, I don't mind the cast. The cast isn't great, but Brandon Routh playing Superman, a lot of people bash him and say he's really bad. Now, I don't think he's great, but he does pretty good. It's hard to tell because the writing doesn't give him much to do. And a lot of people are saying he's too young for Superman. Now, I don't think he's too young for Superman, but I think he's too young for Superman of this movie. Because, put it in this perspective. So, this is in continuity of Superman 1 and 2. It ignores 3 and 4. So over the course of Superman 1 and 2, Superman was around for like what, maybe a year or two? And then he goes away for 5 years. So he's been Superman for at least 6 or 7 years. Brandon Routh doesn't look like he's been Superman for 7 years. He looks like he just got started being Superman. So that's my problem with the age thing. He doesn't look like he's been there a lot. Same with Lois Lane. She still looks young, but she doesn't look like she's like an experienced person in that part. And that's my flaw. Speaking of Lois Lane, the actress that got to play her, as an actress, she's not that bad. But I didn't really get the feeling that she was Lois Lane during the movie. I don't know if it was the writing or her performance, but I just didn't really feel like it was Lois Lane. She didn't have a whole lot of like energy to her. She was kind of just like there. And yeah, she was like a strong character, but she had no real like good characteristics and no personality. And so like whenever I was watching her, I didn't really feel like I was watching Lois Lane. The rest of the cast, Frank Langella as Perry White is awesome. Yeah, he doesn't do much, but he's awesome. Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor would have been a great choice, but again, the writing's not just there, and he mostly just hams it up the whole time. He's just like the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, always cheesy and hammy. But like Kevin Spacey could have done a really great dramatic Lex Luthor. He's not really intimidating or anything. Maybe a little bit near the end, when they're on the continent and they start beating up Superman. But yeah, that's about it. There's not a whole lot to him. See, now the special effects in this movie, this was like the first real modern Superman movie. So we haven't had any big epic Superman things. The last Superman movie was Superman 4, which came out in 1987. Then you had a few TV shows, and you had like Smallville, where there's some decent effects in there. But there's never anything big, so this was our first time seeing Superman in action and doing what he does best, saving people in really cool ways, and you don't get much of that. You do a few times in the first big action scene where he saves the airplane with the space shuttle on top. That action scene is amazing. It's one of the most fun action scenes, and it just gets you pumped up. Only to disappoint, but like when you're watching that scene, it's the beginning of the movie, and you're like, oh, this is the first action scene? I can't imagine what the last action scene is going to be, How are they going to top this? And they really don't top that sequence. He does a few things, but Superman doesn't do anything amazing. The climax, there's not a lot to the climax. He just, kind of spoiler, not really, he just lifts the continent and throws it into space. And there's no real confrontation between him and Lex. You don't really get that. The ending with Lex, where he's stuck on the island, it's just like, okay? There's not much payoff. But that first action scene was just like, wow. This is modern Superman, This is gonna be like the comics. And they didn't do that. They mostly toned it down. And just Superman as a character in this movie beginning, I don't know, he's acting like a teenager. Just like, oh, Lois doesn't like me. And I don't get some of his motivations. Like, why would he seriously leave Earth for 5 years and not tell anybody and just disappear? Like, he's Superman. He would be like, you think he would tell everybody? And I don't know, I couldn't see the Christopher Reeve Superman doing that. And that's what his character technically is the Christopher Reeve Superman. And I really couldn't see him doing that. So, the basic flaws essentially are the plot, which has a lot of holes and something that doesn't make sense. And the cast is okay, but that's the major flaw. I feel, like I said, the effects are great. I love the fact that I love the score of this movie. Not just because he uses the John Williams music, but the composer of the score created his own new themes for stuff like that, and it really works. There's a scene where Superman, he gets his power from the sun, and after this whole scene where he's been beat up and kicked around, which is a pretty dark scene, and being stabbed with kryptonite, he flies up to the sun to get his energy back, and it's a beautiful scene. The way it was shot and with the music, and like the opening of the movie was great, where it fades in on Krypton from the originals, and you hear Marlon Brando as Jor-El, who they brought back kind of by using old footage from other movies, which I thought was cool. And it starts with that, and then Krypton explodes, and then the Superman theme kicks in, and the classic credits start. And when I saw that in theaters, I went nuts. I was like, oh my god, they're doing the classic thing. Oh, like as a kid, as much as I knew it was in continuity of those movies, I didn't think it was going to do that. You know, I thought it was just going to be like the typical modern opening credit scenes, which are really dull. Or it might just be the opening title, Superman Returns, and then that's it. But no, it's the classic opening credits with the John Williams theme, and just such a delight to see. Honestly, I love it. So I mean, some of the throwbacks are a little obvious and kind of like, you just did that because it's a reference to the first movie. Like, because that's what this movie is. This movie is essentially a big budget fan film to Richard Donner's Superman. I mean, think about it. What does a fan film do? It recreates like the style, which this movie is. It has that like kind of slower pace where it's not as action packed. It has, if you're doing a fan film, you use the music from the original. This does that, and you try to throw in a lot of references and lines from the original to kind of make it seem like it. And this does that. So that's why I say this is just a big budget fan film to the Donner films. And on that note, it's pretty good. But as an overall Superman movie, it's heavily flawed. So out of 10, I'm going to be generous on this and give it a 6 out of 10. Because I enjoyed the movie. It was a fun time, but just flawed and a little slow. But it was cool to see. It could have been a lot more. It was a little bit of a wasted opportunity. So yeah, that's about it. That's my look at all 5 previous Superman movies. And the next review I'll be doing will be with Sam, and we'll be talking about Man of Steel. Can't wait for that. So until then, talk to you guys later.